Good evening and welcome to the Village of Key Biscayne. Thank you for attending tonight. We are kicking off our work, our feasibility study with the Army Corps of Engineers, and it's an exciting project that will consider the shoreline from the ocean side to the Back Bay side, a whole of island study that we are undertaking, and we are proud to have the Army Corps as our partner, as well as other partner agencies and stakeholders that are going to be very, very important to this process that we're going to undergo, which may take 3, possibly 4 years of time to get this thing right. And that's the shore of tonight is to give you a little bit of a flavor of what is entailed with this study, so that you have some knowledge of it and that you develop the parameters as we go along towards the end of the study. And with that, I'll turn it over to the manager, who will introduce all the stakeholders that are here with us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and welcome everybody. I really appreciate you all coming out tonight. This is a big night. It's a big night for us. I couldn't have planned it better if I tried that both these things were back to back, right, Ceci? But these all been working in parallel for 3 years, and for whatever reason, they both ended up on the same week. So we're really glad that you all came back out tonight. I think we had about 60 folks last night, and looks like we got another 40 tonight. So one of the things we're going to ask you throughout this whole process is exactly this. Come out, talk to us. You know, we've got pretty much the entire Jacksonville district here today, and they're here. That's exactly what they're here for, to hear your questions, hear your concerns, even take some of your ideas and options as well. So please be engaged. I'm going to ask you kind of let them walk through the slides, let them walk through the study so you understand the process. And then at that point, we're going to have an opportunity, and we actually have the folks lined up here. Mayor, are you going to be answering questions too? I'm always answering. All right. So he's our #1 engineer right there. But we'll have everybody from the Corps up here. Their specialties will line up here, so you'll see who they are. They're actually going to be the ones who are going to be on our study, and they'll give you an opportunity to ask them questions. You know, how are we going to do the engineering? What are we going to do from an economic standpoint? What are we going to do from an environmental standpoint? So they'll be here. They'll be able to ask those questions. They're going to walk through what is a feasibility study. And as you know, anything to do with the U.S. Government and anything to do with the Corps of Engineers is very specific, very detailed. So they'll walk you through and tell you exactly what that is and what it means. They'll walk through the timeline. And they have a very laid out time period that goes through over the next 8, 9, 10, 11 years. They'll talk through some of the issues that they think are a concern here, and that's where we can begin to have a conversation back and forth. Anything else I need to add in there, Chris, before I go further? Okay, so I think I've got it. There are some maps in the back if you ever want to get up at the end and take a look at them. We're going to have some things on the slide. What I want to tell you is these guys are a professional organization. We worked with them before when we went through the original tentatively selected plan, if you recall, when they were just doing the front side and the project that came out. And I remember you and me, Fausto, sitting down talking about that when you were the president council or the condo council guy. And they'll do that again. They'll come in, they'll talk to us, and make sure we know what direction we're going in. So with no further ado, I want to introduce Chris McNeese. He is the project manager for this project. He'll kick it off, run through a couple slides, and introduce all his folks that he has here tonight. So Chris, thank you for being here in Key Biscayne. You can take this one.
All righty. Good evening, everyone. We appreciate everyone coming out this evening. Thank you so very much. We know that we're plenty of other places that you could be tonight rather than with us. So we thank you for your time, and we look forward to your input. As you came in, we hope and pray that you signed in with Ms. Kristen Donofrio, who is waving some signs there. If you didn't sign in, we'd ask that you do that before you leave tonight. Also, we had some comment cards. If you have any comments for us, good, bad, ugly, indifferent, we want them. We want to know what you have to say about the feasibility study that we're about to embark on. What I want to do tonight, first of all, is introduce you to who and what is the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So for some in the room, you ask yourself, what is the Army Corps of Engineers? Well, first of all, we are a Department of Defense organization. We fall underneath the Secretary of the Army, and more specifically, Honorable Michael Connor is the Assistant Secretary of the Army to Civil Works. We do have what we like to refer to within the Corps the green suiters. So we are, as part of the Department of the Army, our Chief of Engineers is Lieutenant General Spellman, and our Deputy Chief Engineer is Major General, Major Graham. So these gentlemen, of course, are in our headquarters up in Washington, D.C., and as the Corps breaks down from its headquarters, it breaks down into 9 different divisions. As you see there in the bottom left-hand corner of the slide, we are global. And so within the Florida area of where we're located is the South Atlantic Division. Within the South Atlantic Division, there is the Wilmington District in North Carolina, the Charleston District in South Carolina, the Savannah District in Savannah, Georgia, and then we have the Mobile District in Alabama, and then, of course, we have the Jacksonville District in Jacksonville, Florida. The area of responsibility for the Jacksonville District is pretty much everything from the Lake City area of Florida all the way south to Key Biscayne, including Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. So that's our area of responsibility, and obviously the Jacksonville District is here to represent Key Biscayne as we look at this feasibility study. Today, so just from additional, Brigadier General Hibner is our general who is in response. He is our division commander. And then Dr. Larry McAllister is our senior civilian for the SAD, or the South Atlantic Division. And then more close to home, Colonel James Booth, as well as Howard Gonzalez. Howie is our senior civilian within the Jacksonville District. Both of these gentlemen were here earlier today as part of opening remarks to the workshop that we held today with other federal, state, and local agencies. Next slide. So let me bring it even closer to home. So as Steve said earlier, we have a ton of folks here from the Jacksonville District, but as I mentioned earlier, we do have additional folks here from our South Atlantic Division. A lot of the folks here from our South Atlantic Division are folks that are considered what are the policy and review team. So while you have folks like myself and other engineers and economists and biologists and environmental specialists working on this project delivery team trying to deliver this feasibility study, whatever we do has to go through a vertical team review. And these policy and review team leaders are usually at the SAD, I'll say South Atlantic Division, or at the headquarters level. They provide us insight to be sure that the solutions that we come up with are within policy and legal. So I'm going to ask folks if you're here to stand up or at least wave your hand. So you'll hear from Miss Amy Thompson, who is our planning technical lead, shortly. Darren Pecora is our environmental lead. He's also in charge of our National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. Mike Nevis is the engineering technical lead. So Lynn and Charles are not here, but they're our realty specialists and will support us on any of our real estate needs, be it easements or be it right-of-ways, things of that nature. Mr. Mark Tiemann is our archaeologist on the team. Mr. Jason Spinning is part of our water quality certification, works with the FDEP on our needs that we may have there with them. Marty Durkin. So Marty Durkin is a planning technical lead. He's providing support to this team. He was part of the previous Miami-Dade County main segment study, and I'll get into that in just a second, but the main segment study initially looked at Key Biscayne before the Corps decided that Key Biscayne needed its own individual study. So Marty's with us to provide us some counsel and guidance. Lawton Perret and Kenneth Cow, these are our economists. Both of these gentlemen will be helping with the economies, looking at our benefit-cost ratio, as well as helping with the modeling that we'll be doing. Jeff Smith is our cost engineer. He's not with us tonight, but those things that we come up with, we have to put a dollar amount to, because whatever those things are that we come up with to design, that becomes a cost, and those costs go into what we call the benefit-cost ratio. Gabe Todaro and Nicole Ward, both are our coastal engineers. They'll be helping with the modeling and supporting the economists in regards to evaluating our damages and determining just where the water is going to go. Miss Amanda Bredesen, she's going to be providing the hydraulics and hydrology support. She's not with us here tonight. David Ruderman is with our communications office. So So welcome to the core paper. All righty. Miss Amelie Case is our Office of Counsel. She's one of our assistant district counsels, and she'll be providing support from a legality aspects in regards to what we can and can't do within the authority of our Coastal Storm Risk Management Authority. Jay Yearwood is with our geomatics. Jay's responsibilities is typically mapping, GIS, things of that nature. And then Miss Barbara Nist and Miss Stephanie Soto are our geologists. Thank you, ladies. And they will be evaluating the soils and providing support to our geotechnical engineers that will be looking at potential structural measures that we may or may not have as part of the study. So, and again, I'm Chris McNeese. I'm the project manager. My job is basically scope, schedule, and budget, and that and herding the cats. So we'll do our best to keep it cheap, but keep the quality high, and work within the schedule that the team determines is the best and most efficient way to provide a solution that we can all agree upon and accept. So next slide.
Do you want to, real quick, introduce some of the SAT?
Sure, I can do that. All right, so let me scan the room here. So as I mentioned earlier, we do have some of our division personnel with us, and while they don't have a slide, I'll start with Mr. Eric Suma. Mr. Eric, please stand. He's our planning division chief in the South Atlantic Division. We have Mr. Max Milstein, who is one of our senior economists and a policy review leader. We have Mr. Andy Lashivo, who's our environmental lead on policy review at the South Atlantic Division. And then we have various other Jacksonville District personnel here to support. So we have Ms. Marcy Jackson, who is in Plan Formulation Branch Chief. We have Mr. Jason Engel, who is an Engineering Branch Chief. And I think...
Kristen.
Oh, and Miss Kristen Donofrio is one of our section chiefs in Environmental. And then we have Mr. Kevin Whitman, who's one of our senior economists within the Jacksonville District. So I think I've got everybody. So Steve was right. We did bring quite a few of the Jacksonville District. So when it's all said and done, you can probably find one person. We're all here to hear from you. So who else?
You forgot your boss.
Who's my boss? Miss Tiffany. Where is she? She's hiding. There she is. So Miss Tiffany Mattis is a section chief with the Programs and Project Management Division. So thank you. All righty. Let me get to the slide that I've been trying to get to. So where are we? So we are right now in the fourth box with the yellow star. But where have we been? So back at the beginning, the village of Key Biscayne and Miami-Dade County came to us and said, we have a problem. We have flooding. We have issues that we would like the Corps of Engineers to address under its flood risk management mission. And so from there, the Corps of Engineers looked for what is called a study authority. The Corps cannot do any types of studies unless we have an authority from Congress or from some law that basically says, yes, you can study X, Y, Z. And we have a study authority, which I will briefly share in just a few seconds. So we have that study authority, and we're now, in FY23, through the village's efforts, through Miami-Dade County's efforts, and with, I suspect, a lot of congressional support through Congresswoman Salazar and others here in the area, we were able to receive an appropriation or funding so that we could initiate this study. So we like to call it, basically what it was called the FY23 work plan. So around the time frame of, I guess it was probably April of 23, when the FY23 work plan was announced, we found out that $500,000 had been appropriated for us to initiate the study. And upon that is when the Corps of Engineers began to coordinate with the Miami-Dade County and the village in regards to executing what we call a feasibility cost share agreement. Once that feasibility cost share agreement was executed in October, we put the wheels in motion, and here we are tonight kicking off the feasibility study. So the Corps was here in December, and we met with the sponsor, Miami-Dade County, and the village, and kicked off the study. And now we are right now meeting with you all as part of the next step, as part of the feasibility study. We're in the time frame of basically at the beginning of, in that schedule, year 3. But as that schedule indicates right now, we probably have about a 3 to 5 year time frame ahead of us. Most studies are done within an average 3-year time frame. We go through various milestones that Amy will get to and provide more detail shortly, but most studies are typically done within 3 years. However, this study will not likely be done in 3 years because of its complexity. It's not a simple solution. If all we had to do was a beach or an ocean solution, it might be something that we could do in 3 years. But we're facing two different forces. And those two different forces is what we want to better understand so that we can stop one on the ocean side and we can stop one on the Back Bay side. So it's complex. So with that being said, I just want to be sure that we kind of set the preface here that it's not likely we'll complete in 3 years, but we're going to come up with what is the right answer for the village. So once the feasibility study is complete and we finish up with a chief's report, that chief's report is submitted to Congress. Congress then must authorize the project. Now, the way in which the Key Biscayne segment is being identified, it would be the third segment of the Miami-Dade County's Coastal Storm Risk Management Program. So Miami-Dade County has two segments already referred to as the Sunny Isles segment, which is north of Bal Harbor Inlet in the Sunny Isles area, and then they have the main segment. The main segment consists of Bal Harbor, Surfside, and Miami Beach. So upon, and I say positively, upon this project's approval, authorization, because I know Steve wants to hear it's all positive. So upon the approval that we hope we'll have, this would be the third segment within Miami-Dade County's Coastal Storm Risk Management Program. So once the study or once this segment is authorized, the next phase is called pre-construction engineering and design. So then we have to wait for appropriation dollars to actually enter into the PED phase. The PED phase is the design phase, where we actually take all of those various solutions, be they structural measures, non-structural measures, nature-based features, whatever they may be. Whatever was authorized per that chief's report and per that authority, those are the things that we will begin to design in the PED phase. PED phase is typically 2 or 3 years. And then after the design phases, we wait for additional construction authority, and that construction authority then comes with a construction appropriation, and we build what was designed. So when it's all said and done, you can see the timeline there. It could take anywhere between 10 to 15 years. So we want to be sure that folks understand this is not an overnight process. We know the village has been waiting for a solution, and we hope to offer a solution. The village right now is working through various solutions themselves in the interim, and we applaud that, and we hope to partner and, I guess, complement what the village is already doing here within the community. Next slide. So just to kind of give you a real quick background, so the Key Biscayne segment was initially incorporated into the main segment study. So the main segment study, so the main segment of the Miami-Dade CSRM program has actually gone through its 50 years. Usually when a project is authorized, the sponsor will partner with the federal or with the federal government or the Army Corps of Engineers for a time frame of 50 years. The main segment, which is Bal Harbor, Surfside, and Miami Beach, actually was authorized back in 1975. Its 50 years was up in 2025. So from about 2018 through 2022, we went through a study, just like the one we're kicking off right here with you all. We went through a study on the main segment. And that project was reauthorized for another 50 years in what's referred to as the Water Resources Development Act of 2022. We tried to include the Key Biscayne segment as part of that main segment's study in the Water Resources Development Act of 2022. What the Corps determined is that, as we said earlier, there's two forces happening on Key Biscayne, not just an oceanside solution, which is what originally the Corps had prepared. We had prepared an oceanside solution to basically be incorporated into the main segment study. What the Corps determined is that the benefits that we were recognizing from the ocean side were more or less being nullified by the damages that would occur from the Back Bay side. So the Corps said to ourselves, you know what, Key Biscayne, because it does have complexity that's not being evaluated as part of the main segment, needs to have its own individual study. And so that's where we are right now, and as I alluded to earlier, we do have our initial appropriation, and here we are going. Next slide. So as I said earlier, we can't do anything without a study authority. So under Public Law 8471, which actually goes all the way back to 1955 law, that authority basically says that we as the federal government or we as the Army Corps of Engineers, we can look at tidal and or coastal flooding issues within the eastern and southern United States. Obviously, based on Key Biscayne's location within the southern United States, we had an authority that was, in this case, already on the books for us to be able to use for our study authority, which allows us to actually then complete the feasibility study. Next. So this is not just a Corps of Engineers funded project. The Miami-Dade County is the non-federal sponsor that has partnered with the Corps of Engineers, and the Village of Key Biscayne has partnered with the county and the Corps, because obviously they are the most critical stakeholder, as this is in their backyard. We need to clearly understand what's going on within the community so that we can come up with solutions that are right for you and everyone else. So for everyone's awareness, the village and the county do have skin in this game, and we're a partnership. This isn't a Corps-driven plan or a Corps-driven solution because it's all being paid for by 100% federal dollars. This is a cost-shared project, and this project's being cost-shared at 50-50. So if a typical feasibility study were to cost $3 million, then the federal government brings $1.5 million to the table, and the Miami-Dade County would bring $1.5 million to the table. But in this case, Miami-Dade County and the village are sharing that responsibility. So in this case, we kind of have a 50-25-25 split. So again, this is all for your awareness that, again, this is not just the study of the Corps of Engineers, but this is our study. Next slide. And I digress, and I will now allow Miss Amy to get into the weeds on the actual planning process so that you better understand where we're going over this next feasibility phase. I'll be around for questions. Thank you.
Okay, now it's on. Is it? Yes. I'm going to stand up right here. Okay. So you've probably heard a lot about the 3 years, $3 million over the years. Like Chris said, we try. Sorry, got it. We try to have our studies complete within 3 years. When you have very complex studies like this, we don't always make the 3-year timeline. Like he said, this one we probably will extend past 3 years. But if you look at our arrow here, we're right at the beginning, where what we call scoping. We're collecting information, we're collecting ideas, we're trying to determine how long we think the study will take and how much we think it will cost. And so that's why we're here. We're here asking for information, concerns, ideas, where you see problems and issues and concerns. And then that leads to what our first milestone would be, what we call our alternatives milestone. And that's step 1. And so usually that happens between 3 to 4 months from when you first start a study. And that basically says, we're on the right path, we've got some good ideas, we have the right scope, budget, and timeline. And then that's when we really start getting into the details and think about what are we going to model, what kind of future conditions would there be if a project didn't happen. And then we use that as a baseline to determine, once we have an idea of plans, what it would look like in the future with some kind of solution. So,
Amy, can I add something really quick? So just to add to what Amy's saying, I hope you guys can hear me clearly, but it'll be with the first 4 months, this study team working with Mr. Williamson, Mr. Samimi, and folks here, getting input from folks here, will have a good idea as to what the scope, schedule, and budget will be for the project. That will be elevated up to headquarters, up through headquarters and up to Mr. Connor's office, as you saw earlier on the slide, and we will seek approval for that scope, schedule, and budget at that time, if we need to exceed 3 years and $3 million. Hope that helps.
yeah, I don't want to get too much in the acronyms and details, but so the team has been working on that behind the scenes as we're, because it's a quick timeline from when you start to those first 90 days. So yes, probably within the next month to 2, we should know how long and how much we think the study will be. And so once we know that, we get to work and start really getting into the formulation process. coming to the public, asking for ideas, really start formulating measures, which I'm going to show you some ideas of measures and what they would look like on the landscape. And then, like Chris mentioned, you go through lots of the review process with some of the people in the room with review team, and then it ends with a chief's report. And this diagram down here is just to show you that sometimes you may end up with some ideas and plans, but it's an iterative process, and you may have to take a step back and come up with some new ideas at times, and go back through process and reevaluate at times. Next slide. Okay, this is the most important, these next two slides. This is what I really want you to see. So when you're looking at a coastal storm risk management study, there's really three types of measures that we look at. And those can be structural measures, non-structural measures, natural and nature-based measures. And there's some examples of different types. And on the next slide, I'm going to show you in a second, it'll show you kind of what they look like. But, you know, there's from the structural measures, you have the seawalls, bulkheads, flood walls. You know, you can have navigational structures that serve a purpose of storm risk management, and shoreline stabilization. A non-structural type measure would be raising houses, and just from driving around, we can see that a lot of that has already been happening, which is great. Evacuation plans, risk communications, just anything that would involve not actually, you know, doing a structural feature. And then the natural and nature-based features, which would be something that mimics a natural feature, which would be like living shoreline, an island, or coastal wetland. And so any of those things, alone or together, could be used to build a plan, or what we call an alternative. So you could have one measure from each category, for example, that could build up one alternative. And so then you could evaluate or look at, you know, 5 or 6 different alternatives that have a combination of different features to consider. So you can go to the next slide. So this is really the best slide that you'll see tonight, and we'll put it back up later too. And it really shows from over here, you can see some natural and nature-based features. That's where you see the NNBF acronym. So you see that beach and dune restoration as a measure, and you'll see some like living shorelines and oyster and coral reef restoration as a more natural measure to consider. And then as you go more to the right here, you'll see structural measures, which like flood walls and shoreline stabilization. And then if you further to the right, you'll see non-structural measures, which would be acquisition, relocation, elevation, building, and like a flood warning evacuation system. So this is kind of a good diagram to see, you know, what each type of measure looks like, and kind of gives you an idea of how to consider the different types of measures that can build alternatives that we would look at in our study. Next slide. Okay, a lot of these were problems that were discussed when the Dade Coastal Storm Risk team was looking at the Key Biscayne segment in the previous study. But I think most of these are still relevant, that most of the problems that we've looked at are primarily from damages from coastal flooding from the Back Bay and the ocean sides, the Back Bay area and the ocean side, mainly from storm surge, tides, and waves, and then also the erosion and wave attack, and then also rainfall and stormwater movement. So I guess the difference in this case is during the last Key Biscayne segment piece of the coastal study, it was identified that the Back Bay was a primary concern. Next slide. And this is really just to identify and to point out the areas of vulnerability as areas get more water in them. So as water, as you get more water in areas, you start to see the areas that flood first. And as you get more water, of course, you're everywhere is vulnerable. Okay, you can go to the next. And this really shows how we evaluate plans. So if you have, I mentioned you may have 5 alternatives. We look at our alternatives not just by how much they cost or how much they prevent damages, but also by these other categories. For example, environmental quality. So how much habitat do they create for example, like wading birds or whatever that environmental component is important for the study. Other social effects, those can be like resiliency or life safety. A lot of times we put environmental justice in this category. Regional economic development, so those could be jobs, tourism, things like that, important for the regional economy. And so we don't just calculate the benefits for the national economic development, which would be the damages prevented for the lowest cost, but it would also be the combination of the total benefits from all areas. Next. And now Mr. Darren Pecora is going to go over his 2 environmental slides.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Darren Pecora. I'm the environmental lead for this project. Actually, I wanted you to go back to the schedule real quick. Just want to touch on where the environmental comes in. So right here under 2, you can see draft feasibility report, EA/EIS. So that's a environmental assessment or environmental impact statement. So, as part of this project, we'll be analyzing effects under NEPA, which, we're going to be looking at effects of the human environment. And federal agencies are required to disclose their effects of the human environment. So we're going to look at all different alternatives to the project and their effects on the human environment. If you want to go back to the environmental slides. So the human environment encompasses social, economic, cultural, and natural resources. And it changes depending on where we're doing our study. Here you can see, a list of some of the things we're going to be considering. It's not an all-inclusive list. The things off to the left, they're bolded. Those are some of the more challenging, resources we're going to be looking at. Fish and wildlife resources, you know that folks, go out fishing in the area, and there's a lot of, it's commercial as well as recreational fishing. Water quality is really important. We have nutrient loading, in Biscayne Bay right now that agencies are trying to deal with. Threatened and endangered species, we'll look at that in a second, but there's a range of threatened and endangered species in the area. Benthic resources, you can see down here in the middle, we have a little coral and seagrass, and we also have mangroves around in and around Key Biscayne here. Another thing that we're going to look at is aesthetics. So, how whatever we go forward with the project has to be acceptable to the community. In terms of aesthetics, is it pleasing? Is it reasonable? Is it acceptable? And we'll be looking at all these things. So, right, in the NEPA document, we'll be documenting how, what does it look like now? What are the existing conditions? And then, what does it look like 50 years from now with no action by the federal government and the sponsor? And then also, how do each alternatives affect these resources in the human environment? Next slide. So here's a species list we started to put together for threatened and endangered species in the area. I just found out that, folks run into American crocodiles at some of the golf courses in the area. So, you might have seen some of these manatees in some of the back bay canals, sea turtles maybe on the beaches. So these are some of the things we're looking at. We'll be consulting with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and National Marine Fisheries Service on these species and doing consultations, and those will be documented in the feasibility report and NEPA document. And we'll also be looking at designated critical habitat and how our project's affecting that. And these are some of the designated critical habitat that's been identified in the project area. We'll also be, this is part of the environmental compliance, which, that's encompassed in the NEPA document. We'll be seeking water quality permits, complying with the Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, and about 35 of those different laws and regulations, as well as Mark's cultural Section 106 regulations. So those are a couple of things we'll be looking at.
Okay, and that was our last slide.
I guess, and I'll mention this since it's up,
Yeah.
and you're probably about to mention it too, but one of the big resources is
Go ahead.
Biscayne Bay Aquatic Preserve. So,
Yeah, this highlights some of our challenges with the environmental resources and the state preserves that surround Key Biscayne, which is great. It just makes it a little bit more challenging for us. So we want to hear from you. Questions, problem, ideas, needs, community needs, concerns, just personal observations. That counts as data. I also want to point out, if you didn't get a comment card from Kristen, she has lots more, I'm sure. Before we get to the Q&A, I do want to give a shout out for tomorrow night. We'll be back. And we have workshop again all day tomorrow with the agencies, the other federal, state, and local agencies. And tomorrow their activity is going to be working through some exercises and activities, and they're going to come up with their own ideas also, and we're going to come to you tomorrow and present what they came up with during the day to get some more, free-flowing information. So we're going to end, and then an hour later, we're going to come over here and give you what they said. So won't be the same repeat of what we did tonight. So, Steve, you want to? Oh, and also, if you don't want to write down your comments, you can also email us or mail us. Yeah.
So if you think tonight, if you think tomorrow night, something strikes you later, you're out walking around, you see something really interesting that you think is anything we need to know about, you can snap a picture, send us a note. It'll all go to that email, and we'll have access to that and get that up to the study team during this whole process. So this is not your only opportunity for engagement. We'll have other opportunities for engagement as the study goes on.
Yeah, and we're going to bring up some of our team leads and do a Q&A. So I need Darren and Mike and Gabe.
So she brings those up. I want to thank Chris for that great introduction, Amy for kind of laying us out that timeline, Darren for all the environmental stuff. Now we're going to bring in the next layer of experts.
And you.
We got our engineers. I saw the economics guys run away.
Oh, they're the microphone. They're the microphone guys. So they'll answer on the fly.
Okay, so they're moving talkers. So,
That's probably good.
so this is your team? All right. So what we want to do right now is, you walked it through, and
Do you
obviously
want-
this is very high-level stuff. But we're going to go back and forth between two slides. You can take a look at this, which obviously gives you the big picture, the satellite, if you want to call it that, and some of the issues we have around it. And then one of the things I thought was a very good slide was the one that she put up with all the different options, kind of in that cartoon factor, right? Because we don't know what it's going to look like yet, but what that does, there you go, that one right there. So do you want to field questions? You want me to field questions? How do you want to do this?
Let's just open it up.
Okay,
If you have a question,
so
raise your hand.
Anyone have a question out there? Question, comment, concern? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm sorry I may have missed this, but
We're recording this, so come on up here. Yeah, so we're trying to get this so other people in the community can see it as well. So.
hi, sorry I may have missed this, but the extent of the actual project, is it just the village or is it all of Key Biscayne? Because it seems like if you were just protecting the village, you know, that it would be very difficult because of the surrounding areas that need to be protected as well.
Well, I mean, it is the village. That is something that makes this even a more challenging approach, right? So that is, and if you want to approach that, or you want one of your engineers to talk about it.
I'll give that to Mike or
Okay.
to Gabe, but the answer is, to what Steve just said, is yes, we are protecting what is the actual developed area. So the county's park to the north and the state park to the north, we are not looking at a measure per se that will protect those areas.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily an engineer question. I think it's a good question. We actually were just talking about that on the way down here the other day. I see someone pointing at Marty. I was going to too, but you can. Nope. Marty's the expert.
So the focus of the study will be on the village. We want to address the problems in the village itself, but that doesn't preclude an alternative from physically extending outside of the extents of the village. So we could build something outside of the, village's municipal boundary that will help, protect the property and infrastructure and people inside of it.
Yeah, because I mean, we aren't isolated here. I mean, we're very much part of the island in terms of the environment and the effects of the storm surge. And, a lot of us have been talking also about impacts on Virginia Key, because again, that's, kind of part of the infrastructure we have to live with and protect.
It's very good questions, and I'm glad you brought up Virginia Key, because actually Virginia Key is actually part of the Miami-Dade Coastal Storm Risk Management study, Back Bay study, excuse me. And one of the benefits that we have, our marine coastal engineers, Moffett and Nichols, sitting right over here, not only are they working for us, but they're also working for the county on that. So we have the ability to learn what they're doing at the county, steal and bring it down here, and vice versa. Take what we're doing and share it back up there. But it's complex.
Yeah,
gonna
it's
be very
great to know. I
complex.
would think the county would also be wanting to protect Crandon Park and Bill Baggs as well, but.
Yeah.
Okay.
Next question. Ceci, I knew you had one. Yes, ma'am.
But
No.
how does, so, for example, what would happen? We will have a wall, so, village, welcome to Key Biscayne, there'll be a wall, and they will be walled in?
No, we
and
don't-
the
we don't know
water
any
will
solutions yet,
slide?
though. We don't know any solutions yet,
So,
Ceci,
are
so.
the same thing in the park? And then my question, why are we different from Miami Beach? In the sense that, is it the way our island is located? Because I know that, for example, I got water in my house when Andrew, but I think it was the water retreating from the bay, because I am close to Harbor Drive. So
Yeah,
is,
I'm gonna take it to our,
what is the difference?
water people.
Why-
Yeah.
how does Miami Beach?
These are the experts over here.
Hi. So the main difference between the Miami Beach segment and Key Biscayne is really has to do with the elevations and the topography. So you all live here. You know that Key Biscayne is very low lying, and while there are portions of Miami Beach that are also low lying, it's a lot more globally low lying here, where most of the island is very low. And you can you saw some of the slides that showed some of the inundation extents that we showed earlier, and those are just very basic pictures, but what they do show is that once the island starts to flood and as the water levels get high enough, it floods very, very quickly. And that's really the main difference here between here and the beach, where the beach just has certain areas and there's a ridge there, and it's just a little bit higher, and that's the main difference here.
Make sense? No, and one of the reasons that, as Chris walked through very eloquently, we were originally in the Miami-Dade study, right? And, it became very clear that we are unique. We're different, that not only do we have a front side that we have to address, we've got a back side as well, and part of that is the low-lying nature that we have. So the threat that we face from the back could easily come across and impact what we have on the front side of the island. So
Also, just to address the first part of your question, which is just coming out with a wall. At this point, there's no solution. There's a whole wide range of possibilities. Would a wall be appropriate here? No, it wouldn't be appropriate. But what is appropriate? That's the challenge that they're in the process of unraveling through all of this data collection, through all of the community meetings that we're going to be having, to try and then figure out, well, what is the most appropriate solution? And most likely it's going to be some combination, you know. But to come out and suggest that it's just right off the bat, are we going to have a wall? No, that's just one of many possible solutions, depending on which one is the most appropriate.
And I think one of the reasons why I like this slide the best is, you know, the best way to deal with anything coming at you is to do it in depth. You just don't want to put one thing up. You know, you want to hit it a couple times, right? By the time it gets to you, it's very weak and it doesn't have an impact. And those are some of the things we're going to ask them is, you know, how do you address this storm surge a number of times before it even gets to the property? So, Ed.
What is going to happen to the causeway?
What do you mean what's going to happen to the causeway? We're talking to Key Biscayne Coastal Storm Risk Management here. So, in what way? But with the study? They're not studying the causeway. But
There's no solution.
I'm kind of picking up a sense that there might be a little bit of confusion. So one thing that I think is very exciting for this group is that you guys are actually hearing at the very, very beginning of this study. So you are at some of the earliest stages that the Corps has in our planning process, and you are at the point where we are all together in this brainstorming these ideas. So like to Roland's point. Thank you. To Roland's point, we're standing here saying, hey, we want to hear from you. We want to know what you think about these solutions. Like Amy's saying about this slide up here. All of these are just measures. All of these are things that the Corps and all of your state, federal, local agencies are going to be spitballing ideas and brainstorming ideas. So we want to hear from you, but when you're saying about the causeway, like, we're going to just be dumping all kinds of ideas and starting to formulate, okay, what looks right here, and brainstorming all of that together. So we don't have a solution yet. We are right at the start of that. So this is a really exciting time.
Thank you. It's definitely an exciting time, except where we are looking at issues which we discussed last night in a village meeting, starting with an area that's crucial around the school and moving to others. And the potential problem with what we hear you speaking of, at least what I hear you speaking of, is that this is going to be a comprehensive study, the result of which might be available in a 3 to 4 year period. I would ask if you could consider, if the village manager would agree with this, that you try and at least phase it, because the village is going to be spending a fortune, at least for us it's a fortune, to start part 1, part 2, part 3, some of which we hope might be well in progress by the time, if not before, your overall study is done. So I would ask that you consider doing this in as phased a manner, integrated with what the village has on the table now, so that we don't find out after our phase 1 that it's going to conflict with what you have as an overall. Of course, that lends to doing a complete study first, but doing a concept study followed by something that phases with what we're working on could be very helpful. That is your consideration.
So no, very, very good questions, Michael. And look, there's a reason they walk through this very deliberate process. So when you say phased, I would say deliberate, right? Because they're going to walk through step by step with us at the table all the time. We're going to come back to you periodically with questions. We'll show you where we're moving, feedback along the way. So, you know, one of the first things I said, I'm not sure who was on my boat today, is, hey, we're doing a stormwater issue. Make sure you don't interfere with those outfalls as we drove by. So they know it. They're going to take that in consideration. And so I want to turn over to Amy because she also wants to add something on top of that as well.
So these guys, well, there's two that do our modeling. So we have, one of those slides, I kind of breezed past it because it's too much in the weeds and details, but we have to predict what would happen in the future if we didn't do our study. And that's all the things, all the projects that you're doing on your own. And so we incorporate all of those things into our analysis. So we know, but they're giving us all of the information about what you're doing. And so when we do our models and look at our plans, those are already incorporated. So we don't conflict with what you're doing.
In fact, Michael, today, Roland and I gave a presentation about 45 minutes going through the detail of what we intend to do to make sure that our program is synchronized with their project. But you're exactly right. We can't do this independently. They've got to be connected.
I'd also like to add, there's a distinction to be made between the Corps' focus, which is on storm surge inundation related issues, and then our focus, which is also very much on interior flooding as it's related to rain events. Those two things require different solutions, but need to work sort of hand in glove. And that's exactly the reason why we've been working as closely with the Corps as we have been, and also one of the reasons why we have Black and Veatch as our program manager and construction manager for the overall resilience program, which has as a component of it the shoreline protection, has as an element of it the stormwater system, has as an element the roadway system. So there will be a mechanism to have all of these things coordinated and sequenced, and we understand that you can't do it all at once. So we are phasing the stormwater system, and similarly, they can't do their study and then the development of their implementation and solutions, and then the execution of their solutions all at once. So that's exactly the reason why we are coordinating as much as we are, and why we have a program manager and a construction manager sort of like sequence and prioritize all these things so that they are actually phased properly.
I have no doubt about that.
Yeah.
My point was simply to ask for the extreme amount, and forgive me for adding one thing. For those of us who were here during Andrew, it was not necessarily an issue of the volume of water, though Andrew is a once-in-a-hopefully lifetime item. But coincidentally, I had two cars at the time, only one of which I could drive off, and the other one, because of not the volume of water, but the insufficient dissipation, turned into the most wonderful tropical fish tank by the time I got back here. So even in what we discussed last night, which I didn't want to interrupt, part of it is the volume that we take on, but part of it is also the ability to dissipate. And even though I'm on the condo side, I think of those people who have homes, and at those few seconds, when the water rises up to where it fills the first floor of a home that was not built post-Andrew with the additional elevation, it's those tiny moments that make the difference of people's lives downstream. I don't want to say more except pleading for that kind of coordination.
At the end of the day, the water needs to go somewhere, whether it's floating, whether it's a storm surge or hurricanes, where is it not going? And that's why maybe you guys need to coordinate the Army Corps and the village.
Oh, yeah, we're definitely doing that, yes.
Otherwise, how we can move forward with the stormwater with the outfalls, maybe can damage the environment on the bayside.
Right.
And that is,
No,
I
you,
know that I'm in an area that it's flood damage like the worst.
yeah, your area is the big B of the benefit cost ratio. So yeah, so your area is going to receive quite a big benefit out of this beachside approach. So, but we don't know what the answer is going to go yet, right? So our commitment to you is that we're going to work with them every step of the way, Feedback, they're going to understand our program. We gave them a quick 45-minute view. As time goes on, our program isn't fully developed yet, right? We're going to develop more. We just got the kickoff last night to begin design. We'll share that with them as we go through. Now, we want to make sure we do this right, and we can take every step to make sure that we do this, and we get feedback from you as well.
Yeah. I'm just going to speak. I appreciate all the answers to that question, and I want to add one aspect to the phasing component, because you were talking about the expense, and over time, we've talked about how the study would take 3 to 5 years. I've heard tonight. The team is going to determine in the first 4 months exactly how long it's going to take, exactly how much money the study is going to take. That gets pushed up to the chief, as Ms. Thompson said earlier, chief of engineers. If that recommendation is accepted, it goes over to Mr. Connor, then over to Congress for authorization consideration. So Congress determines whether or not they want to authorize it, but that doesn't mean that Congress will agree to pay for it. It's always a two-step process. So I say that because authorization comes first, and then Congress decides to pay for something at a later date. So in all likelihood, you're looking at least a 2-year difference between when the study is done and authorized by Congress before Congress will take up the consideration as to whether to pay for it. So I hope that that helps with a little bit of understanding on how the study process works with appropriations.
Yes. The solutions on the right side there all involve barriers, and a lot of times when you go to put those type of barriers in place, you can compromise the environment that exists at that location, like seagrass or
Yeah.
mangroves or other types of environment. Are there going to be exceptions, or how does that balance?
Well, I'm going to turn it over to the environmental guy, but if you heard him say, when he said the word EA and EIS, environmental assessment, environmental impact statement. Did I get that right there? So why don't you talk through some of the very
There
detailed.
can be a trade-off. If there's damage in one location,
Yes.
there can be some other
Yeah,
type
there's
of
mitigation approach.
So we would
but
do
you'll walk.
mitigation, depending on the amount of the impacts, we would look at mitigating. So if we impact seagrass, that'd be like one thing we'd look at mitigating. We'd work with the state and other federal agencies to determine that through an analysis process. We'll be looking at circulation through modeling potentially of water quality modeling and circulation water modeling to see how that might change the area. And then they had pointed out mangroves, so that might be another resource that we could impact, and that's another thing that we would mitigate for.
So if it was identified that there would be damage caused at one location, that doesn't nix the whole thing. It just it's possible to mitigate it somewhere else or in some other way.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a risk. I mean, I don't think we know
Yeah.
100% either way yet.
It depends on the amount of the impact.
Because some of those type of barriers can actually enhance the environment if that's done properly.
Yeah, and that's something we'll look at, and that'd be environmental benefit to the project, right? So we can count that in our benefits. So.
I see somebody in the back who really wants to talk. Another environmental.
Are you done, John?
Yeah, I'm done.
So when we start talking about environmental impacts, the regulations require us to do a few things in steps. Those steps are, at first, avoid impacts. Can we avoid those impacts with the alternatives that we're looking at? If we can't avoid those impacts, can we minimize those unavoidable impacts? And once we have avoided everything we can, minimized those effects, then we would look at compensatory mitigation. Where that would be, what that would be dependent on what those impacts really were, and really looking at it from a cost and a loss ratio standpoint, and we would basically give them what they need and deserve. So it would be a balance. All right?
Yep. Right. Yeah, I wanted to follow up on the points you were raising before about the environmental impacts and how some things can be beneficial enhancements. And one thing I ask you to consider is that we have really healthy grass beds on the ocean side, but they have taken a real beating from the storms, because what happens is the beach erosion ends up on the grass beds and it smothers the grass beds. And it takes about a year or two at least for them to recover. They eventually do recover, but if you reduce the beach erosion, you will also reduce the damage to the grass beds. So that can right there be a big mitigation for putting out something like a barrier reef or something like that.
Yeah, do you want to address that?
That's something that we're going to look at.
Yeah, if you go back and look at, like Google Earth or other aerial photos of before, the big one was Irma. Even though it didn't hit us directly, it destroyed probably 100 acres of grass beds out there, and they're mostly come back. But then Ian took out last fall. Or fall before this last one, Ian took out many more acres of grass bed that had come back were then destroyed by the beach erosion of Ian. So if you get those photos, you can see what it looks like before and after each of those storms in terms of the sand taking out those grass bed areas.
Yeah, and in the previous study that we did here back in 2021, we did a seagrass survey going out about 1,500 feet into the ocean. So we have pretty good documentation at that time what was going on, and there was about 70% of the quadrats that we sampled had seagrass, and it was very healthy, with 4 different species of seagrass out there, and I had a picture from that survey. So it indeed is very healthy out there, and it does change, year by year depending on what's going on. And there's seagrass actually all around the key, and once again it changes depending on what's going on with erosion in the area. But so we're gonna have to look at that and work with our agencies to determine the best path forward. We might need to survey some of these areas again, but it's a great resource, and it's a rearing area for juvenile fish that recruit to the fishery, to help our economy and fishermen.
Darren, before he steps away, why don't you tell us all the different organizations that you work with to make sure that we do address environmental concerns? I mean, there's alphabet soup there, so why don't you go through that?
Yeah, so from the federal standpoint, we have the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, NOAA Fisheries, Environmental Protection Agency, let's see, and then from the state of Florida, we have DEP, and then within DEP, we have the aquatic preserve system that we work with that's kind of separate. Let me think. Yeah, Fish and Wildlife Commission. Who else? Yeah, we got EPA. Yep. So the sponsor, they have their Department of Natural Resource Agency. Who am I missing, Kristen?
I don't think you need to get them all, but what I want to do is I want to make the point that there's a lot of organizations involved, right?
We met with some of these agencies last week to introduce them to the project and get their initial thoughts. It's part of our study process. So they gave us some great feedback, and we're going to continue to meet with them throughout the study to engage us and help develop it, really, because they're our partners also in the study.
And that's one of the values of bringing something like the Corps of Engineers in. So they have the ability to reach out into all those organizations and really dig deep into those environmental questions. So.
And just from an engineering standpoint, all the options are on the table. So when you're saying breakwater is growing, some sort of coastal structure to help mitigate against that erosion, at this point in the study, like Kristen was saying, we're looking at everything. We want to hear everything from y'all, like we're doing tonight.
So, no, great idea. So anyone else have some thoughts about what they'd like to see or things that they're concerned about, what you see on a regular basis in terms of, last time we had a big storm? Yes, Isabel.
Thank you. What I would like to ask, well, I have a very loud voice. Should I get this?
We're recording, so
Okay.
And all your friends out there in TV land.
One of the questions that I have is, are we going to recuperate our dunes? Because the ocean is eating our sand, and every year we are spending money in bringing more sand. So is there any mechanism that can be applied to avoid losing our sand, our dunes, and whatever we have?
Well, we go back to the engineers on that because they have some ideas. So.
I know they have an answer to this one.
Yeah, so in the short term, I know the village has a plan to get a beach nourishment project out there in the coming months, so that will help in the short term. In the long term, there's definitely the possibility that we will look at beach nourishment and dune nourishment as part of our study for long-term success. There are plenty of benefits to having a healthy beach and dune system, including erosion prevention, to protect, all the infrastructure from erosion. It provides environmental benefits, and so that's definitely on the table. I will note that a lot of the risks that we're seeing on this island is inundation-based, however. And so whatever solution that we come up with has to be a comprehensive solution. So that may include some sort of beach system ultimately, but we have to look at it holistically, and we can't just do one thing if it's not going to protect against the risk. So, you know, like everybody's saying, everything's still on the table, and we're definitely going to look at it. And we've done it on other studies. And you know, we've built beaches on other studies for those types of reasons. So we'll look at it here and we'll analyze it as part of our process.
You could also look at beach renourishment and dunes as the original nature-based feature. I mean, they are meant to erode and accrete. And once you build it, it's designed. We know it's going to erode. And with any dune feature, you know, we typically will vegetate it. And you know, the vegetation, once that's able to take hold, that obviously helps keep the sand in place on these long duration nor'easters or issues where you have your increased water level and the water is able to kind of get to that dune elevation. The vegetation really helps that as well.
Good question, Isabel. Thank you, thank you, thank you. What else do we have out there? What else do we have out there? Any thoughts? Any thoughts? Okay, so, you know, what we said right from the, yep. Oh, we got Vice Mayor.
I can't not say something, apparently. I just want to say, first of all, thank you to everyone in this room for coming. Especially, we're so happy to have these people here from the Army Corps. I've been on council now almost 8 years, and we've been really working hard to get them here and to get to this point. And it is so amazing to think that we're no longer going to be fighting this fight by ourselves. But more, I wanted to just share an experience I had this morning. I had the privilege, really, of getting to go out with some of them on the bay and listen to them really kind of geek out from like an engineering standpoint about like all these exciting things that they can do. And the thing that made me feel the best, well, there were two things. One, just as a resident, it made me so happy to hear them talk about our involvement. And, you know, I tried to impress upon them, you know, the flavor I brought was like, that's Andy Garcia's house and things like that. But they were so engaged in wanting to know what our community thinks and to stay sort of lockstep with us along the way. And, you know, I shared like, you know, this is a community unlike any other. We are extremely highly engaged, we are highly educated, and everyone really cares and listens and comes out. And I kind of expected that to be like but it wasn't. It got them sort of jazzed about working with us, which I thought was amazing. And then the other thing that really struck me that was really them geeking out was all these different solutions. Like, well, over there, maybe you could do something like this. And my fear was they were going to come down, and you know, if you've ever been to New Orleans, I imagined we were going to get these giant levees that were going to like close when a storm was coming. But it was like, they were talking about layers of defense and different implementations of different types of things that I'm clearly not an engineer, but it was really reassuring to hear, one, that they really care about what we have to say, and two, that they're not looking at this as just a one type of solution, come and put up a wall, and really try to work with us and enhance our community as well as protect it.
So thank you, Vice Mayor. I think that's well said, very well said. I'm going to reiterate one more thing she says. We're here to listen to you. We're here to listen to you. We got a very professional team that Chris has brought down. You heard them talking tonight. They're going to be with us every step of the way throughout this study. And we want you guys to be with us every step of the way through the study. So we're back here tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. So let us go to work tomorrow. We'll come back with some ideas. I want to let you know they're just preliminary ideas. We're not going to solve this problem tomorrow, Ceci. I'm looking at you. But preliminary ideas, step by step by step. We want your feedback. Please come back and ask questions.
Yes, Steve, I also want to add, we want your help, too. Yeah. Because this room should be busting at the seams with the number of people that are here to listen to what they have and to share their thoughts, concerns, ideas. It shouldn't be that there's any empty seats in this room.
Yeah.
So you need to go out.
Bring your friends,
to
bring your
every
neighbors.
single one of your friends and make sure that they come.
Yeah.
You've got more friends than one.
So that's the help we need from you.
And
We'll do our part.
I'll add tomorrow the groups. This may not be fancy presentations what I show you because we don't, like I said, we would literally have an hour. So it may just be even like pictures of what these groups of professional people like have drawn on paper. And so, you know, feel free to, on the comment cards, if you have an idea and you want to draw it and give it to us, that is totally fine with me or any of us. We'll take that as an idea, and feel free to, you know, share.
Didn't they sink ships all around there? They created.
I don't know. Oh, like artificial
Key
reefs?
West has sunk a lot of ships. A lot of shipwrecks are now artificial reefs, and I've dove on a lot of them. So they're great.
Work here?
No, not necessarily. Not right off of our beach.
Okay,
but yeah, we
Roland
actually
said
have,
no.
We actually have a lot of artificial reefs that have been created from ships that have been sunk, and I've dove on a lot of them, but they're like miles out. So what we're suggesting to be considered is some sort of submerged structure that could be created into an artificial reef like they're doing with the University of Miami and the Defense Department as shoreline protection type approaches. Maybe that is a possibility here to reduce the shoreline recession rate, and that's something that they'll be keeping in mind. They already considered it the first go-around, but they're going to reconsider it. Maybe it'll stay on the table, maybe it'll get taken off the table, but it will be considered.
It'd be like an engineered structure, you know, concrete balls with like holes in them. They're like, you know, fastened together.
And how far out?
To be determined.
Yeah.
We got to know how the water moves to make that decision. So
These guys would have to
But
do a
he's
lot of
already
work.
telling you what he wants to put out there. So. It could be. Could be. That's like he said over there, new ecosystems, right? I mean, you know, it all is make sure you do it the right way. So, any more questions? Please, before you go home, I want to make sure all your questions are answered tonight. We're going to go ahead and break now. If you do have questions, we'll stay here. We'll be here for about 5-10 minutes, 15 minutes if need to. Thank you for coming tonight.